Okay. So just standing, feeling the sacrum. So the sacrum is like a meeting place of three things. So your spine coming down into it, and then the two legs separating out. So if you just think of gravity pulling you down, then basically you're being stacked against the ground. Yeah. So there is a sense of compression in the joints. So what we would like is for our relaxation to be a little bit more active, so that we're releasing the hips and we're releasing the knees and the ankles. And then you get almost a sense that there's a little cushion of air inside each joint that's keeping the bones separate and stopping them from grinding, but particularly here, across from here, and then across from here. So the sacroiliacs. So the more one gets into the work, the more you begin to appreciate that it all depends upon internal quiet. So it's like being in a state of, like awestruck, you know, if you're driving and you come across an amazing vista and you just stop the car and get out and you're just dumbstruck, you know, there's no words. For a moment, you're just clear and you're just full of awe. So that is the emotion that you should have to every moment. Yeah. So it's like you're thrown all the time into what they call a pre-reflexive consciousness. So a consciousness that is just pure consciousness without you having condensed into a subject. Yeah, so it's not a consciousness that refers back to you. It's just wow. Yeah, it's wonder, what Lawrence called wonder. And if you can maintain that state, then that's basically enlightenment, I should think. So it's like everything takes you by surprise, but in another sense, nothing takes you by surprise because you're in that surprise state all the time. And that sense of like an apersonal, pre-reflexive consciousness, that's just spirit. So that's just a situation that's invested with spirit. And so what is it that actually invests the space with spirit? It's you. It's your primal consciousness. Okay, so now let's just sort of just up and down, but imagine you're sort of, there's just this breathing going, or like a heartbeat, there's like a pump. There's a certain resonant frequency of the body. Yes. So just sinking into the legs and just springing up gently. So imagine like a steel ball hanging from like a bungee rubber from the ceiling, and it's completely still. But you would be able to sense movement within it because it would be sort of boinging very gently. So even though it was still, you could sense that it had this potential for movement. So this is what we want. Even though we're still, there's this movement going on inside. Almost like there's water inside you and it's sloshing around a little bit. So I'll just sink down into my legs and I'm thrown back. We just want a feeling of energy, a feeling of something leading the movement. So something in me drops and that takes my body down, and then there's a natural return. Something in me lifts and that takes my body up. So I release to gravity, and then something just springs up and I lift with it. So very much like the trampoline, you know? Just bouncing very gently. I mean, it's always in slow motion. So imagine you filmed your kid on a trampoline, you know how full of joy they are? And then you watch back and you really slowed it down into real slow motion. Then you'd be able to see the energy. You'd be able to see something coming through the child before its body caught up. So we're just trying to sort of just really stretch things into slow motion so that we can separate these different effects and feel them as separate effects that just occur sequentially after each other. That's it. And then just in and out a few times. And again, just real slow motion. And then let's just turn with it. So as you open, just turn to the side a little and then back. So you're just receiving more of the room because you're turning. And just feel the turn. So feel you turning into the unknown, into something you couldn't see before. So you're just full of, full of wonder. You're being startled all the time, in a sense, by what you encounter. So you feel it in the heart rather than think it in the head. So it's a feeling that, something here opens up to accept whatever it is I encounter. And now let's just bring it in and out. So again, just very gentle, very slow. So no violence. Everything we do should feel like it's natural. That's it, yeah. But also everything that we do should fill us with awe and wonder. So just feel the energy squeezing into your kidneys and then squeezing back into the dantian. So just really trying your best not to stick the bum out, so your tail comes under a little bit as you pull the belly in. So it's your min meng that's squeezing backwards, not your tail. Just feel the two kidneys So the two kidneys are associated with these hip bones here, yeah? So we'll get into that a bit later. So pull. One more. So pulling in and out. So this this mood that this sense of wonder, of awe, and like enthusiasm and eagerness, it's a sense that you're just gushing out and forgetting self in the act of encountering the world. Yeah. So in order to maintain that as a process, one needs the opposite as well, which is this real cold, ruthless centering that has to balance that. Yeah. So we always need both, you know, both contrary emotions, if you like. Otherwise, your energy will just leak out, you'll lose it, and then you'll have to rest and come back. And so we're just looking really at that state before the words start, yeah? Before we start talking to ourselves. Yeah, so that requires a certain courage, because the reason we talk to ourselves is because we need reassurance all the time. We need a voice telling us how wonderful we are. And so without that, you're just alone, but you're so with the world that that aloneness, that solitude isn't a problem. So before you have become a subject, and before the world has become the myriad creatures, the panoply of objects, yeah? Okay, and now let's just turn it. So just feeling this real willingness to turn, like a sense of adventure. Something in me just wants to leave what I'm looking at and turn to encounter something new. So what makes it difficult is that our lower body, our legs, the arch of our legs is having to stay planted and facing front. But my head and shoulders are turning around. So, you know, in Tai Chi, we want the turn to come from here. So we don't want it just to be the shoulders that are turning. So from here. So what has to happen in the legs to enable yourself to turn willingly and comfortably. Yeah. So there's little adjustments taking place inside the legs and inside the hips all the time. So as I turn here, I'm really having to let go here so that I can leave this leg behind, and I'm really having to fold here. So just keeping part of your mind on each aspect. Yeah, so I'm folding here, releasing here. I'm folding here, releasing here. So there's different complementary actions in each hip, and that will just produce a potential difference. So it will produce a flow of energy. Yeah, so the release on this hip is the same as the release on this shoulder, which allows the arm forwards. And then just back to riding horse. Okay, and now let's yield with it. Maybe let's bring the feet up. So this is how I tend to sort of do pushing hands now with my students. Feet very close together so that you've got nowhere to escape. You know, when you've got one foot in front of the other, you can always go back to give an appearance of yielding. What we want is to get the yielding purely from the turn. Yeah? So I turn. So you're yielding with this hand, drawing the person in, and your other hand is reaching around the back of them. And then yielding here. So the side of your body that's going back has to be balanced by the side of your body that's coming forwards. Otherwise you'll topple backwards. Yeah. So part of the yielding hand is reeling something in, like a fishing line that's being reeled in. And then the other side is extending outwards. So again, they're in perfect balance. That's it, yeah. So just really feel the turn. It's like you're just revolving around the person. Yeah, in a sense, I often feel, like when I'm doing the form, that the form should be much more sort of circular, the postures. Yeah, so like you're yielding and you're just getting behind the person instead of yielding and then returning with a frontal attack. So those postures, like the one that precedes punch, where you can just slip behind the person. So here, ooh, and then I'm actually pushing them through the same direction that they were coming. So the person is going to be least stable, basically in the direction that they're coming. The last thing they expect is more energy than they were giving. So if you can get behind them and give them a bit of a push, then they will topple. And they're also very unstable perpendicular to the direction of their attack. So if you apply energy in this direction, then that will also topple them. So just feel the shoulder having to open up in order to get behind. It feels like it has to do a lot, but really the person is so close by then, you don't really need to reach that much. And this sense that the yielding side of your body is sinking and shrinking because it's reeling in, and the other side of your body is rising and expanding. Yeah, so I remember John telling me that, when Dr. Chi pushed hands, his feet were just together. He never took a big stance or a deep stance because his thing was getting behind the person, He had no interest in retreating. So here, you're in two minds. You've got one mind which is behaving like a law and drawing the person in, and another very active mind that's actually getting behind the person. So it's a bit like an embrace, but the two arms are very, very different. Yeah, so for me, this is what single hand pushing should be. I mean, this is basically what double hand pushing is. Yeah, when you yield with your ward off, the rollback reaches around. Yeah. So you momentarily disappear in this enveloping mist. That's great. So one hand is really listening and the other one is almost just caressing. It's so active. It's stroking the person's back. It's an amazing feeling when you do it with someone, because they really do get behind you. Okay. So now let's just bring it back to riding horse for a moment. Again, just getting the posture right. It all depends upon the position of the sacrum. And so you want it slightly forwards of where it would be if you were chickening out with your legs. And this sense that it's really relaxed and it can just hang down like the ball of a pendulum. So this is like the foundation. And then from that, you can emanate, you can wake up and send this sense of wonder out from yourself. So you're listening. Yeah? So just imagine you were sort of, you're meditating at night. It's pretty dark. And then you hear a sound. And it could be an intruder or whatever. It's like your hackles would rise and you'd just instantly enter a state of pure listening, vigilance. Yeah. And the intensity of that listening would just mean that you'd hear things that you'd never normally hear. Yeah? And everything would become a potential danger, a potential threat. Yeah? And what was it that made that sound? Is that a movement? You'd almost get neurotic. Yeah? So that's the sense. That's the sense of wonder. Okay. And now let's just try, maybe just going from leg to leg a little bit, just feeling the trampoline of the leg. I sink into the leg and the leg returns the energy. I sink into the leg. So to get into energy, you have to stop making decisions. Yeah. There's no choices. You sink into the leg and the leg returns the energy and takes your body. So it's not as though I make a decision to move in this direction. The leg just is compressed as much as it can, and then it has to expand. So there's that moment where I'm feeling both the dropping sinking and the rising lightness. And I really want to relish that moment and stretch it as much as I can. So sinking down and something's rising up. And just feeling the mood associated with each. Yeah? Can you keep this mood of sort of depressive sinking and this mood of eyes lifting, a real lightness rising up through the body? And then just let it turn slightly and you'll have a figure of 8 basically in the hips. Yeah. So it's this, as we sink into the leg, this feeling of something coming over my head. which is there. It's just that we normally block it out because we're unaware of it, because we're too much with the syncing with the body. So one hand is with your body sinking and the other hand is with the energy that's rising. And just try and keep the sacroiliacs relaxed and the sacrum in the right place. The sacrum will always tend to drift back a little bit. So we just try to not let that happen too much. So this sense of the master's hand on your sacrum just easing you forwards, the reassurance of that touch. And you can feel it's pretty much the same as the yielding that we were just doing. It's just got more of a vertical element, you know? More of a down and an up. Whereas before we were just operating on the horizontal plane. So, so one hand is taking the person into my foot and the other one is lifting. So it's like each time you go to the side and return, it's almost like it takes your breath away. Yeah, so as the arm comes up, it's like, yeah, like you've seen a ghost. And now let's go back to riding horse. So now just feel that figure of 8. Yeah, so it's a figure of 8 like this. So if you think of a pathway along the figure of 8, then there's one side of the figure of 8 that opens up and the other side is sort of receiving. So that's basically, we've got the yielding figure of 8, a figure of 8 that is funneling energy into this here and emitting energy from the back. Yeah. So we just have to be careful that this funneling doesn't push my bum back. So it will push your bum back relative to you, but relative to the room, you're actually being driven forwards. Yeah? So we just need to be able to see ourselves from different vantages, if you like. Yeah, so you've got the guardian behind you, or the teacher that's actually just helping this down and forwards. And you've got your own yielding, which is pulling this backwards. Okay, and now let's feel the figure of 8 on the vertical plane, so the figure of 8 in the spine. Yeah, so normally, they talk about the macrocosmic orbit, so they get this circuit going. They've got a loop, like a circle, that goes around the torso, so down the front of the body, underneath, and then up the spine. So we tend to work more with figures of 8 because we want something that has a yielding quality and a dynamic quality. Yeah. So we had the figure of 8 here in the hips, which runs all the way through the body. But now we want a figure of 8 like this. It slips under and then comes in. So you can bring it in dantian, or you can bring it in at the heart or at the throat. It doesn't really matter. And then up the back and down the front, and then back in here and under. Yeah. So the circuit that's going on the vertical plane within our own body is a figure of 8. Yeah. And then that can yield as well. So as well as yielding with this figure of 8, I can yield with this. So I can get the head coming over and the tail coming under to create this hollow which draws the person's energy in. And then you get that sense that the tail and the head are always moving in the same direction. Yeah? So that's the yielding circuit. Now, if you were attacking, that would just momentarily reverse. And let's say, you're going for a run. So when you're going for a run, you have the opposite circuit going. It's like this. Yeah. So your legs going behind you are flicking like this. Yeah. You know what it's like after you've been for a run, the chest just feels so open. It's almost like you've turned yourself inside out, and effectively you have. Yeah. So when we're standing, we're sort of almost at that point of it flipping either way. We're slightly more yielding because we want to be having an effect on this space, like a listening. But it could easily just flip out into this, and I could be on my way. Yeah. Okay, and now let's just work this figure of 8. So first of all, just get the fingers, just tracing it. So going up the spine, over the head, down the front, through the navel or the dantian, out of the min-meng, underneath, and then back in. So we're just seeing the energy in our mind's eyes. Ooh. Yeah, so something has to happen to get it to go through the middle. That's always the tricky part. So here I have to suck it in, and I throw it up, and then I just tip my head forwards and it'll come over. Tail coming under. That should feel natural to us. To most people it doesn't. So down through the middle, up. How do you get it to wriggle up the spine? That's the tricky bit in the way. Yes, all the time the legs are softly holding the sacrum. My head arches back a little bit to get it to come up the spine, and then my head just flicks forwards, and that throws the energy over the head. And then here my tail sticks back a little bit, and then I roll my tail under. Yeah, so there needs to be a lot of action in the lower spine from the min-meng down as well as up. So here and then let's just get it in just in the one hand and just feel it. So I'm going up my back, over my head, through the middle here, underneath. Yeah. So if you just take it off this plane and bring it more onto this plane, then you'll get it in the spine. It's like a figure of 8 that's happening here. Yeah. And I'm just tracing it as best I can. That's it. I'm just feeling it in the spine. And then the other hand, so here, going whoa. And remember, if it's not working, if you can't feel it, you pretend. Never let it get you down. Yeah, so that's the most important mood to be able to produce, is the one that makes things happen. Ooh. So it's the figure of 8 is really cleaving to your spine. It's really grabbing your spine and embedding inside it. So just try not to move the dantian too much. So the sacrum is relatively still. That's your sobriety and your ruthlessness. But the movement in your head and your hand is really maximal. So, so it's not really a movement of your body, it's a movement within your body. So the energy is taking a pathway through your body and your hand is just tracing that. Okay, and now just back to riding horse. So just feel it. Yeah, this is in the right place. It's heavy and it's still. And you've got all this movement within the spine and within your aura, if you like, your energy field. And just feel it, you know, when you're of spirit, when the spirit has come up a little bit, your environment becomes, you know, what I call this transcendental field. Yeah. So all the objects within your environment have like a specialness. Yeah. They're almost hovering. Yeah. And that's something that you have invested the space with. So that's how we give. That's generosity. That's how human beings, that's how creatures give back to the world. They give it with the quality of their spirited consciousness, their awareness. Yeah. So it's not giving to charity or doing nice things. It's just how awake you are. Can you bring life to everything you encounter? And it has to be that sort of pre-reflexive consciousness, that consciousness that's there before you are, if you like, yeah? Otherwise, it's always pulling back, it's always referring to you, and you're just like a black hole that's just sucking everything up. So Deleuze, he had a beautiful phrase, my wound existed before I did, yeah? So this sense that there's part of you that's before the mind, before the thinking. Yeah? And that's the part we just want to really wake up to. And that's just what, you know, what Lawrence would call glory and power. Yeah. So thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, you know, that sort of thing. So just seeing this liveliness, this spirit everywhere, especially in inanimate objects, if you like, yeah. Always think of, you know, Disney Beauty and the Beast, you know, where all the pots and pans and the plates and the cutlery comes alive at night and they sing songs and they're dancing, yeah. There's this sense that something in you can invest everything with so much life, it becomes literally moving. Okay, and now let's just bringing the energy over and just like we were making the bread last week, yeah, so some real physical action, you're really manhandling this elastic dough on this table in front of you. But again, in slow motion, you really have to bring as much energy crushing down into it as you can. So you really reach back and just feel how strong and stable your legs need to be to support this action. Because we want all the movement really to be coming into the hands. So we don't want the sacrum to move too much, otherwise a lot of the energy will be wasted. So it's like you're lifting a cape and throwing it over your head and it just crushes down. And it's really shouldery. So really get the shoulders involved. It's very unlike Tai Chi. So just really pull the neck, pull the shoulders up to the neck, so the neck feels really squashed. And just feel, you can feel it's wanting to slip all the time into one hand at a time. Yeah. So just do a few this way first. And then just get it going. So you bring one over and then the other. So it's like a real labor, real physical work. That's it. That's it. So really just feel the shoulder, like you've got these real hefty, meaty wings coming out of your shoulder blades, and you've got to get it over. You've really got to use your back. You know, you've really got to. Can't just rely on the arm. That's it. And then out again. And then just feel the shoulders, feel these big, meaty shoulders that are coming down into your arms, and this neck that is almost disappeared into the shoulders. Remember when we were in Highgate and we were into the weights and everyone had sort of gone home and I was working with John and he said to me, "You're going to do the weights?" I said, "Well, I was going to do my squats, but everyone's gone, so there's no one to spot me." Because when you're doing heavy squats, you need someone there to make sure you don't hurt yourself. He says, "Oh, I'll spot you." I thought, "Oh." And so we loaded it up to my maximum and I got down and I was squatting away. And then John just said, "Okay, put some more weight on." And I was thinking, oh shit, you know. So we did. And he says, "Okay, now when you go down, scream yourself up. Yeah? Just scream, bellow as loud as you can to get yourself to come up." Yeah? And I did. And it changed my life. Yeah? Just realizing how much energy you have in reserve that you can actually bring into the action if your spirit really demands it. Yeah. And I was lifting almost twice what I was used to. Yeah. So this is what we're digging inside all the time to just try and find that excess that we never normally exercise. Yeah. Okay. Now let's try the same thing with the legs. So what we're trying to do really is just give ourselves shoulders strong enough to protect the neck and give ourselves hips strong enough to protect the lower back. Yeah? So the two weaknesses in the spine are basically the two constrictions. So the neck, yeah, and the lower back where we are meant to have a waist. Yeah? Those were the days. And so if we can really get a sense that these bones are really clad in layers upon layers of tough muscle, then the lower back can sort of sink into that the same way that my neck can sink down into my shoulders. This is the idea. So let's just try. So just exactly what we were doing. So we were doing this sense of coming over in order to come down. Yeah. So it's just, now we just want the same action with the legs. My leg is coming over in order to come down. Yeah. So the leg comes up a bit and then down, the same way my hand came up a bit in order to go down. So that action that we had in the shoulders, we just want to be able to produce it in the hips. It's more difficult because the legs are just more reluctant to behave like arms. And so, and I just, so the leg comes over. And just feel the spirit, feel the charge within yourself that needs to take place in order to somehow become a different creature, because this is quite an unusual thing to do. So you need to become different. So, like an animal, you know? Okay, and then just back to riding horse. And now again, just feel it. So when we got the shoulders going, there's almost a sense of this, like a heart shape. The shoulders rise up and then flow down into the arms. So we want the same feeling here. Like my hips, my legs come off the sacrum from the top and out and flare, really flare before they go down. And then I can just allow my lower back to just stack down into that. So these two crests are always protecting my lower back. So it's always a trade-off. So if you get that too much, then you really limit the mobility within that area, and you can't really get this whippy energy. And if you get too much of the whippy energy, then you're liable to damage the weak points in the back, the lower back and the neck. Yeah, so riding horse is squat. This is really squeezed out, and my shoulders have really squeezed out of my spine. And then you can get the same feeling in the head, like you've got two horns that curl out like this, like the horns of a ram. So round, and then coming down into this point of the chin. There's something very primal about the ram and the bull, you know, or the goat, the male goat, the billy goat. Yeah, so our image of the devil, you know, he's sort of half goat, you know, he's got the horns and the muzzle. and he's standing on his toes. So we're always, we're like archaeologists, we're trying to sort of go back to a sense of humanity before we became too much locked up here, when the world was still a magical place rather than a place to profit from. Or the deer. The deer are such beautiful creatures. You think of the deer with the antlers, Okay, so now let's just bring it back to. That's it, lovely. And now just feel the line. It's almost a relief to come out of riding horse and back to this spiritual aspect. Yes, there's one thing John used to say, the trouble is with most spiritual work is it lacks spirit. Yeah? So this sense of, the spiritedness that comes from riding horse and being sunk from confronting pain. It's just so important, because without it, everything's just theoretical. And that beautiful phrase of the Kabbalah that I encountered, the flame of God is the soul of man. Yeah, so this sense that there's the spirit in us, that part of us, just the life force that keeps us going, that stops us from just falling to pieces and dying. That's an aspect of the divine. Yeah. And it's all I really need to do is to try and give that pure expression. Just listen, with eyes bulging with wonder. Okay, great. So let's leave it there.